Sometimes I feel the weight of the world fall down on me so heavy, and I need a friendly voice with some good theology. Calvinistically speaking, though I mix a manly drink, Pepsi and shoe polish, and I hit the YouTube link. Don't say hit, that sounds violent. And I feel my troubles all melt away. Oh, oh, it's your Calvinist podcast with Keith Foskey. Beers and bow ties, laughs till sunrise. It's your Calvinist podcast with Keith Foskey. He's not like most Calvinists, he's nice.
Your Calvinist podcast is filmed before a live studio audience. And welcome back to Your Calvinist podcast. My name is Keith Foskey, and as always, I am your Calvinist. Thank you for joining me for the show today. And in just a few minutes, I'll be bringing in our guest. But before I do that, I just want to make a few reminders about the show. Number one, we are a ministry of Sovereign Grace Family Church, which is in Jacksonville, Florida. If you are in the Jacksonville, Florida area, please come visit us, and you can learn more about us at sgfcjax.org. Also, keep in mind that we are part of the Truth in Love Network. There are plenty of other great podcasts on the network, and we'd like to point you to those brothers and point you to their shows. One other thing I have on me today is the shirt from our shirt store. This is the I hope it was a blast for you, because it was certainly a blast for me shirt. It's my little saying that I give out on our Church Soup episodes. Some people thought it would make a fun shirt, and now that shirt is available at our spring store, and the links to everything will be down below. I want to continue to thank everybody who supports us over at buymeacoffee.com. And if you want to get a hold of me, send me a message at keithfoskey.com. And we thank the brothers over at Fellowship Studios for putting together that website for us. Whew, that's a lot to say, but I want to make sure I say everything as we're coming into the show. Well, guys, I'm super excited today to welcome my guest. He is himself a YouTuber and has had a presence on YouTube now for almost a decade. He has over 250,000 subscribers, which means I walk into this breaking the 10th commandment automatically, right? I'm already coveting his awesome YouTube presence. So I'm having to repent before I even start the show. And I do want to ask him about that coveted play button. Did he get that from YouTube? Because I know that's what you get, I think, after you pass 100,000 subscribers, which is really cool. He has over 400 videos, and many of those videos have hundreds of thousands of views, and he talks about the Bible. Isn't that awesome that he's reaching that many people talking about the Word of God? He's super talented. And without further delay, let me bring him in and introduce him. This is Matt Whitman of the 10-Minute Bible Hour. Matt, thank you so much for being a part of today's show.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. That was all really nice. Appreciate it, man. Yeah, they give you the button, but I don't know what I did with it. It's somewhere, and I do have it, and it did show up eventually, and I really wondered how that would work, but that is a real thing, apparently.
I want to tell you something. If I got that button, I would wear it around my neck like Flava Flav. I would have it on a chain. Everyone would know. I would have. I'm so vain. I have to pray against my sinfulness every day. No, but man, I want to thank you for coming. I know you're super busy, and you're always putting out great content, and people don't realize how much work this is. I mean, this is a job in and of itself. And that was one of my first questions I wanted to ask you. You have such a huge online presence, and you're putting out great content all the time. And I do think it is really great content.
Thank you.
Is this your main job, or is this something that you do on top of another job, or and if so, how do you manage your time? That's just a YouTuber to YouTuber question, but I think might be interesting for people to know.
Yeah, well, like you, I did the YouTube thing while pastoring a church full time for a long time. Eventually, both were going so well, and I enjoyed both so much that I felt like I sort of needed to pick, just because there's only so much time in the week. And I thought, well, I've done church for a long time. It was great. Went well at the beginning, went well in the middle, went well at the end. Let's mix it up and do the internet thing full time. And so 5 years or so ago, as we're recording this, I made that jump, and I guess I miss a lot of things about church. Also, this has been a really fun change up. It's a different rhythm. It's a different list of problems, different list of opportunities. But in terms of the amount of work, good heavens, you're right. It's a ton. The YouTube thing was my really big project and my really big focus for a long time. And then I added over the years a couple of podcasts. And now my big project that most of the work goes into and where I connect with people the most, I guess, is I do a daily podcast that is literally pick a book of the Bible. It's like drive time radio. I say the 10-minute Bible hour, it's 10 minutes of content. There's some goofing around on the front end and the back end. And as long as it takes to get through that, that's how long it takes to get through that book of the Bible. So it took 800 daily episodes to get through Matthew. And it's about the most fun I've ever had doing anything like this. So I got the YouTube thing. Then I have the daily podcast. I just have to do it every day. Go make the donuts, and it's a blast. And then I do a podcast with my buddy Destin, who does YouTube stuff as well. He does science and engineering stuff. And we do a program called No Dumb Questions that is two good friends talking about things in his science and physics wheelhouse or my history and philosophy wheelhouse. And then we bicker like good friends, and for whatever reason, people like it. So that's the rundown. And yeah, it's very full-timey, and that surprises me, because when I used to watch people make internet stuff, I'd be like, well, this looks like they turn on a camera and mess around, but it's not that. You actually have to think, or you say even stupider things than you otherwise would. So there's some effort that goes into it.
Oh yeah. Probably my favorite show to make that I do is not so much the podcast, even though I do love and enjoy interviews like this, but I enjoy my news show. It's called Church Soup, but it takes so much time. I'm only really able to do it about once a month. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's like the SNL Weekend Update, but it's about church, and it's only usually about 10 minutes long, but it takes me 3 or 4 weeks to write the content because it's jokes. It's funny. I did it once a week, it would suffer in quality. It would also take way too much of my time if I wanted the quality to be up. And as I'm in full-time pastoral ministry, I just don't have time to do it. People are like, why don't you do it every week? I'm like, because I can't. I don't have staff writers, right?
Right. And that's the thing. I like doing some funny videos here and there. And I've done a couple of press conferences. I did one with the guy who runs the Lion Death Pit from the court of Darius the Mede, and it was so much fun to write that and green screen it and act it and get it just the way I wanted. And then everybody was like, you should do that all the time. Like, how? I have kids, man. Like, come on. A huge amount of work.
The one you did where you were Jim from The Office, and you guys were you were saying Bible, Bears, Beats. I forget but that was like 5 minutes. It was very short, not even 5 minutes. And I was like, this is a lot of work, just cutting yourself into that by itself is,
dude, that's work. A deep cut. I'm impressed. That is way into the archives. Well done. Very well done.
Well, like I said, I've been boning up for this, but again, I've been watching you for years. You've seen your stuff. I'm very thankful again. One, just for your demeanor. You know, you don't seem to be the kind of guy who's going around punching people in the face or looking to make enemies. You're trying to, reach across the aisle while at the same time holding some, what I consider to be pretty strong convictions. I remember when you talked about the different Bible translations, and you were talking about which ones, are more literal and which ones are less dynamic equivalent and those things. And, you were talking about the King James Bible, and you mentioned something about the fact that, hey, there are people who really hold to this, and I understand, but at the same time, I don't agree. And the different things is like, those types of things. If we can say just that, hey, I understand where you're coming from, but I don't agree. I understand where you're coming from. I still love you, but I don't share that conviction. Yeah. Why can't we all be honest and say that sometimes, instead of saying you're so wrong, I want to punch you in the face? And then I think that's the way people do.
Well, I think that's a great question. And I want to give you first crack at it. Why do you think we can't be honest just about convictions and things that we hold without it automatically being a fight?
Honestly, I think that we tend to be tribal and territorial. That's my sort of simple answer to that question. I think people tend to want to be, they want to insulate themselves so they don't have to answer questions that are more difficult. And if you stay within your tribe, you tend to only have to deal with what's within your tribe. And so if I don't have to talk to the Catholic or the Eastern Orthodox person or the non-Calvinist or whatever, because I am a Calvinist and I'm pretty, I mean, that's the name of the show. People know who I am.
Right there in the name, Doug.
Yeah. So, but if I can't talk to somebody like Leighton Flowers and have a genuine conversation with a dude like that, somebody who I know holds to, so many things that I don't, then where am I, what do I really believe what I believe? Or am I just willing only to believe it within the echo chamber of my own group that agrees with me? Am I willing to go outside of that? So I think tribalism and territorialism, we got to protect our sect is part of the problem. And that's my thought is I think that's what happens.
Yeah. I think there's an implicit, especially within Protestantism, I think there's an implicit threat that this is a zero-sum game. And either my system that makes sense to me is comprehensively right, and therefore there is no other system that could be valid or functional theologically, no other way to read the Bible or the work of Christ. That creates a lot of pressure. And I think a ton of people feel it. And even though not all groups, but most groups would say that ultimately we're saved at the volition of God. For whatever reason, for his glory, for his inscrutable purposes, but in his ever correct judgment, he decides, this is whose eyes I will open. I mean, it's just inarguable, even in the words of Jesus and even in the first half of the book of Matthew, right out of the gate, it's immediately obvious that some eyes are opened. Why does he do that? I don't know. Everybody agrees, though, that almost everybody agrees that the grace of God and the mercy of God extended for no good reason other than here is my mercy and I'm making it evident to you is how this thing starts. And that's at the heart of it. Yet in lived experience, what I find is that in the post-enlightenment mind tends to think that our correctness is really what generates our right standing before God. Right thought, right opinions, holding to the correct list of compatible ideas is what makes our right standing with God happen. And while I agree with that, I mean, the threefold test of orthodoxy in 1 John clearly involves receiving the gospel handed down to us and rightly understanding who Jesus is and all of it. At the same time, well, what if you get in an accident and your brain breaks? What if you were right about every single thing for 9 days during your 39th year of life while you were on vacation, but then one opinion changed when you got home and had a conversation with a buddy over coffee, and he was wrong, and you were only 98% right from there on out? Is that 9 days that you were right about everything good enough to generate the mercy of Christ to now activate for the rest of your life? Or did you need to die during those 9 days? So that, I mean, it's an absurdity when you get into ultimately our right standing before God is a product of 100% correct theological understanding. Of course we aspire. Why would I want to be wrong? I mean, if I'm wrong about something, I would want to immediately change that, because we're talking about the God of everything, and I want to repeat things about him that are correct. I don't want to be wrong. But in the process of honestly working it through, sometimes we're going to be wrong, which is why his grace is sufficient. And ultimately, our right standing before God is a product of his grace and his character and his mercy. And out of that flows our minds starting to adopt, our eyes starting to be open to who he is and the more complex truths about who he is. But I think that part of the reason we can't be honest and we get fidgety with each other and we descend into nervous fighting is because we fear that if somebody else is right, literally our standing with God may be in jeopardy, because that could mean we're wrong, and wrong is the unforgivable sin. And I just don't think that's biblical. I think there is grace for my brain trying hard and being incorrect.
Wow, that's good. It reminds me of something that RC said, RC Sproul, of course, who I'm referring to there. And he was asked the question, is wrong doctrine a sin? And he said he believed that it was, but he was thankful for the fact that God forgives sin, and that, he knows he's going to have some doctrines that are not correct. He's doing his best as a theologian to try to minimize that. But at the same time, there's certainly areas where we're going to miss it. And he was talking about, I think, in the context of his relationship with John MacArthur and how they share different views on baptism, and yet can share the same dais during a conference. They can both stand together and preach. And so the question was, well, if his doctrine is right, then your doctrine is wrong. Is that doctrinal distinction, is that incorrect doctrine sinful? And he said, well, ultimately we would have to say, it ultimately ends up being untrue, and therefore it's, the definition of sin is missing the mark, right? So yeah, obviously there's a sense in which it's sinful, but it's not an overt active seeking to violate God's will. You're seeking God's will, you're just getting it wrong. And so God's grace is greater than your failure in that moment. And I think there's a blessing in that, being able to say that. And certainly an encouragement to me, who I know gets things wrong. I don't know if you've ever had to do this as a pastor. I know that there have been times where I preached something and someone later came to me and showed me an error, and I had to later go back before my congregation and say, hey, I was wrong. I missed this, or what I said about this text, I was incorrect. I don't know if you ever had to do that in your years as pastor, but I think it's incredibly humbling, because you're the guy who's supposed to get it right. Like, you're the guy who's studied for all this time, and yet you can still get it wrong. And yet I think it's good for the congregation to hear.
Yeah. A couple of those I can think of were gross authoritative overstatements on my part about things that never happened in the Bible. Like, this is the only place in the Bible where we see this. Well, the only thing it takes to disprove that is somebody walking up with the Bible and being like, what about this? Well, dang it. And also, why don't you find another church where they like to be questioned? Because around here, we have a doctrinal statement, but in practice, whatever the last thing I thought is the doctrinal statement. You're gone. No, no, none of that. Yeah, it's massively humbling. And one of the things I quickly learned is I need to really qualify or greatly reduce statements that are drawn from my authoritative knowledge of the Bible, making absolute statements about what's in there and what's not. It's a huge document. I've read it a gajillion times, and I keep missing stuff. I have the power of the edit on my daily podcast, and I miss stuff. And yeah, I had 3 chances when I prepared it, when I set it into the mic, and when I edited it to get that right, and I still didn't. Come on, man. So yeah, missing happens.
That's just such a funny line. I think you need to find a new church. Like, you don't come up to the pulpit and correct me. That's just, I'm sorry.
But, okay, but my friend, how much tension in church to the subject we're talking about is born out of that insecurity? How much of inter-Christian hostility is born out of insecurity? And I think so much of it really does come back to that. If our security is in 100% accurate knowledge, we will never be on a firm foundation, firm footing with God, firm footing with each other. It's just too big. It's the Bible is just long enough and big enough that a lifetime doesn't quite get it done. You went to school for this. I went to school for this. I've done this full time my whole life. And there's so much stuff. I'm not even kidding, dude. There's so much stuff that still, just as I read through the Bible, like a normal person who reads through the Bible because I want to, how many times have I been through it? And there are things in there, not like, oh, that's a brilliant insight I'd never considered. No, there's stuff in there like, really? That guy went down there to that place and said that? I didn't even remember this anecdote. I mean, I probably saw a flannelgram of this when I was in 5th grade, and I still don't remember this. It's such a big book. It is easy to forget things. It is easy. Very few people can hold in their mental cache the entirety of the history of the church and the Bible and and have that all on their mental work table at the same time to be able to visually immediately draw on those pieces and compare and contrast and hold it all together in perfect harmony. It's not even a matter of character. It's a matter of the limitations and fallenness of humankind, that you're just going to be wrong even if you're morally impeccable because of your brain. So this is an expression of our imperfection, and it's something that should not make us insecure. It should make it really easy to have conversations with other people, and really easy to say, I don't know, I know in broad strokes, I know these basic truths that permeate all of Scripture. I'm always reading and learning and listening to other people and trying to grow. But you being right and me being wrong doesn't wreck God. And it doesn't mean that my grandma, who thought what I thought and then died, is now in hell. I mean, pump the brakes here a little bit. Do we trust the character of the God on the other side of this, or do we not? And clearly there must be intellectual grace. There must be forgiveness for our limitations, or God would not have revealed himself in the way he revealed himself. He would have gone way, way, way simpler with a way, way shorter book.
I don't know if you saw my face. I started laughing. I had to back away from the microphone when you were telling that story. And I have to tell a very quick personal anecdote, because when I was in seminary, I was teaching Sunday school at our church. I've been in the same church since I was 7. I actually grew up in this church. The church sent me to seminary, and then I became the pastor when our former pastor retired. So I've been here for 37 years. I've been the pastor for 18 years. Phenomenal. So it's just been yeah, I'm praising God, because I hope to die here. I really do. Not immediately, but I mean,
important caveat.
Yeah.
Just a clarifier for the audience.
But when I was about 24 years old, I was teaching Sunday school, and a lady in the Sunday school class mentioned something about the she-bears. And she was referring, of course, to the story of Elijah and the bears and the bald head, but I had never heard it called the she-bear story. And so I just totally blanked. Like, I was like, what are you talking about? And another lady said, I don't want a teacher who doesn't know the Bible, and you don't know the Bible because you don't know the story of the she-bears. And at this point, I'm like, oh boy. But I was just mortified. I'm standing up in front of the class. I have no idea what I'm whiffing on in this moment, because I'm swinging, and there's no, I can't hit the ball at all. And it took me a minute to figure it out. And like, what is she referring to? Because again, I think that's the King James rendering, is the she-bears, right? Okay. Just the way it says it. And it just did not resonate in my brain. And she thought I was the most ignorant fool, and whatever, but I couldn't help but laugh when and now I know I'm going to get 1,000 she-bear memes and on Twitter when people listen to this. I'm going to get a lot of jokes about that.
Yeah, I think Christians should be the kind of people that you feel okay being wrong in front of. Like, that's going to be an invitation to fun. Like being wrong is like putting the ball in play as you play tennis. Like, how do you get the ball in play? Throw out an idea, maybe be wrong about something. It's an invitation to hit the ball back and forth. And there's nothing boringer than 1-on-0 tennis. You have to have someone to play with to play tennis. So you have to be nice. You have to be gracious in defeat and gracious in victory. And also, hit it 3 or 4 times before you ram it down the other person's throat. Like, make it fun for all parties. And I really think a lot of this conversation, if you just follow the rules of a hit around in tennis, it works pretty well. That first ball in play isn't a fight. It's an invitation to play. It's an invitation to hang out. Let's see where this point goes. Let's see what parts of the court we use. Let's see what challenges this provides to our game. And I'm sorry you got yelled at about she-bears, I think is the point I'm driving at.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of the tennis analogy. I'm thinking maybe if we switch to a volleyball analogy, there are some people who just stand at the net and want to spike every time. They're just always ready to, pull out the Top Gun card and just jump up and, because that's and of course I just brought to mind Top Gun and all those,
so oily
playing volleyball. Yes. Oily men playing volleyball. There's a picture for, that'll be our thumbnail. You and me playing volleyball.
That's perfect. I will I will oil up and get a photograph over to you. I'm looking around for my chest oil now, and actually it looks like I've misplaced it. We might have to do something different. That's such a pity.
I I look like a Yeti if I take my shirt off. So you don't oil up first.
Yeah, well, the fur is resistant to oil. It just beads and rolls off. There's nothing that can be done. It's unoilable.
Well, I have several questions. I'm so thankful for everybody on Twitter who responded. And one guy I love, he put the meme of George Costanza saying worlds are colliding, because it was, you and I coming together to talk. I thought that was
I thought he
fun.
was saying I look like George Costanza, and I was about to say, thank you, sir. That's a handsome man. I will take that. Jason Alexander knows how to get it done.
Yes. So in these questions, several of them had to do with the name of your show. And I know people are kind of just joking, but how did you come up with that name? Because that's been the name since the beginning, right? 10-minute Bible Hour. That's a great question. The name of my YouTube channel at present is just my name. It's Matt Whitman, home of the 10-minute Bible Hour. The daily podcast is what was the original idea of the YouTube channel. So now the 10-minute Bible Hour, that is, you can't quite see it from there. That is the daily Bible, straight up Bible content podcast. When I started the YouTube channel, I started working on that in 2014. My idea was that I was going to pick a book of the Bible, whatever I was working on in church, and do like a 10-minute-ish sort of late show style coverage of it very quickly without any of the application. Just here's the content of this part of this book of the Bible. And the reason is that I was pastoring a church out in western Wyoming in the wilds, getting toward Jackson and Grand Teton and Yellowstone. I mean, a Home Depot run there is 5 hours round trip. And so in this church, we had massively faithful attendance, but you have to shop on weekends. It's like, it's the frontier. You have to go get supplies. This is as remote as the continental United States is. It's just rugged, beautiful terrain. And so the result is, if somebody attended at that church 2 Sundays a month, that was a pretty good attender. But they were totally plugged in. If that happens in the Bible Belt, well, you're what's the term you use down there? You're backslidden. Like something's gone terribly wrong here. And so the temptation, the natural thing to do then would be to go very topical so that it's not serial. And if people miss weeks, it doesn't matter. They can jump back in. You keep attendance up because nobody feels like they're missing anything. You can just pick up, and every episode's a one-off. That would be the temptation. I don't want to do that. I don't think that's what's modeled in the early church or in the Bible for how you do this stuff. I want to pick books of the Bible and go through it. It eliminates my biases. Whatever's next is whatever's next. If I don't like it, or it makes me look bad, or I don't know the material as well, then you get to see me not like it or not know the material as well or be uncomfortable. It's fine. We just let the text dictate what we talk about. But you can't do that when people are only there 35 Sundays a year. So I started this thing that was just meant for my church, where I'm sitting at my desk and we do a quick rundown and we joke about things and we keep it light and we keep it fun. And that tone is there because, look, we're not in person. We're not doing the application here. I just need you up on the story and how we're approaching the text and to have this common baseline of plot. So it's almost like a last time on the Book of Acts sort of feel to those videos. Well, after a few months of that, I mean, the numbers got to be way more than the attendance of the church, and then way more than the attendance of the church. And then it was really clear nobody at church was using it anymore. And it was people who just wanted to go through the Book of Acts. But it takes a long time to make videos and write jokes and all of that stuff. And so pretty quickly it became apparent that when I got done with series number 1 on the Book of Acts, we were going to need to bump that over to some kind of daily audio only. It was always meant to be a podcast. So I got done with the Book of Acts. I started doing other things that I was interested in, covering other topics, going to visit other churches, things like that. And we moved the 10-minute Bible hour thing, tagline, "It's the Bible without the sermon,"
over to this daily podcast, and it's just that. It's the Bible without the sermon. So the result is that tons of people of all different stripes, well, emphasis shouldn't have been on tons of people, but people of all different stripes listen to the program. There's a significant non-believing contingent who listens, Catholic, Orthodox, Calvinist, not Calvinist, evangelical, even people who would be part of traditions that are sort of para-Christian listen to the program. It's overtly creedal, historical, Orthodox Christianity in its approach, but it's just 10 minutes of Bible and then we're done. See you tomorrow and hope you have a good day. So it was meant to be, all the way back to answer your question, a riff on the old-timey Bible hours that were on the radio. And now Earl and Charlene Duchesne present the radio Bible hour broadcast of Bible radio hours on the broadcast network of Bible. And then they do the thing and it plays the music. And I was trying to make fun of that and make it sound absurd. And now I just have to, I've spent the last 10 years explaining the name. I don't know. I don't know what to do now.
No, I think that's great. I think that, and it makes sense. And it's interesting. My show actually began where so many began during COVID, because we weren't seeing each other as often, even though we only took a few weeks off. We did suspend church. Florida lockdown, and we suspended for a few weeks, but we did live stream stuff, and then we started meeting outside, and then we started meeting again inside, but it was only a few weeks. But even in those few weeks, it felt very disconnected because no one was going to the stores, no one was going to restaurants, no one was going to people's houses. So I just started doing a daily Bible reading, and it originally was called Coffee with a Calvinist. That was the name of it, because every morning I get up, get a cup of coffee, and talk about whatever it was I was preaching on, sort of like what you did. So I get it. You were trying to connect with your congregation, and it led to something else, and that's cool. Yeah. Yep. Well, the other program that I'm sorry,
that's a good way to characterize it. Yeah.
Yep. So the other thing that a lot of people asked on Twitter regarding the names is, you said you have a no dumb question show, and everybody wants to know what's the greatest dumb question, because obviously we know what you mean when you say there are no dumb questions. The dumb question is the question that goes unasked. So what's the greatest question you've got on that show? Not necessarily the one that you think is the dumbest, because we don't want to call anybody out or make anybody feel dumb, but what do you think was the best of those? And I know that's hard, because when you make shows, each one's you feel good about, but which one do you remember the best, I guess?
Yeah. And it's not really a Q&A format show, so there aren't a ton to choose from. We do a thing on that show called the Twisted Knuckle, and we haven't done an episode like this in a while, but we have a fake bar called the Twisted Knuckle, and we put in, we got ambient sound and everything. And from time to time, people mistake our subreddit for a place where you just come in and blurt out questions about things. There's another subreddit called No Stupid Questions where people do that. And so even though it's a discussion about a given podcast and episodes of that podcast, from time to time, people just wander in out of the cold and step into the subreddit and just start yelling random questions. How does a catalytic converter work? What? And all that, you imagine the guy at the piano stops and everybody looks and the glasses stop clinking. You're like, well, okay, I guess we could cover that. It's not really what we do here, but sure. So we've done a couple of episodes like that, but I don't recall the ridiculous questions off the top of my head.
Gotcha. Well, I know that in looking at a lot of your videos, it looks like that, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to try to characterize it, and you correct me if I say anything incorrect, because I certainly don't want to, but you mentioned a minute ago about, creedal Christianity, that even though we would say there are things that we can get wrong, you do hold to certain, foundational things, the deity of Christ and things like that. You mentioned how 45% of evangelicals don't believe in the deity of Christ, and how disturbing that is. That was your most recent video, right?
I want those 2%. It's only 43, man. Like, you make it sound like it's a crisis.
So that's, and I do think there are those types of things we can rally around and say, okay, this is it. And so within that, and saying, okay, that would include like your, Roman Catholics who would affirm those creedal statements, and even the Orthodox who would affirm those creedal statements. And you've done some videos where you've gone out and you've met, and you've gone into cathedrals, you've gone into Eastern Orthodox churches. What is one thing that you, during your time prior to expanding out, that you thought about, and we're going to do this for Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox. Okay. What's one thing that you thought about Roman Catholics that, and again, I'm a Southern Baptist. Well, no, I'm not a Southern, I'm a Southern and a Baptist, not a Southern Baptist. So like I grew up in a town where there was basically, you were either a Baptist or you were not a Christian. Like Catholics were just like, that church doesn't count, right? Like it's there, but it, so what's one thing that you've learned going to the churches, seeing the cathedrals, talking to the priests? I know you had a great conversation. I was actually listening to it this morning with the theologian, where y'all were in the coffee shop talking. I forget his name.
Yeah.
So what's one major takeaway?
Oh man, one. Golly, that's tough.
Well, you can feel free to do more than one.
Right,
I was thinking like
this is a major
couple
takeaway.
Of good things.
All of the positions other than my own, I discovered through the process of going around to other churches that all of the theological positions other than my own had been so heavily strawmanned to me by being in my bubble, by well-intentioned, very intelligent people, that it was jarring to actually sit in the same space and get in the deep water with someone who had gone through the exact same experience about me and my convictions. There were things in all of these conversations where I realized that we were much closer than I had thought in terms of our assumptions and how we get there. There were other things where I'm not sure the straw man was strong enough for how much I disagree with and how radically certain groups hold things that I just do not see. So every conversation I have, there are a few moments that are shocking, jarring to me. Like, wow, I thought you would dismiss that particular thing as like a crazy, gossipy rumor that outsiders have about your tradition. But not only do you think it, you're doubling and tripling down on it. Seriously. Like, for example, with Catholics, I fully expected to bring up indulgences in some of my conversations and have them be like, that is a cudgel from the Middle Ages on our worst day that Protestants still beat us over the head with. Nobody thinks that. Oh, but they think it. and it's no, you can do things, even you can give money to the church to do some clerical work or paperwork or something, and many Catholics believe that is somehow efficacious in shortening an arbitrarily assigned number of years that you spend in purgatory. I mean, my friend, I am a chasm away from Catholics on their understanding of purgatory and indulgences, and that the church somehow in exchange for money would have the ability to affect that. I thought, going into my conversations with Catholics, that it would be like when Luther said, if the Pope for the love of money could set people free from purgatory, would he not do it for the love of people? I mean, I fully expected, like, this argument's over. Just do it. If you have the ability to reduce their sentences, if you alone have that power per your election, do it. Come on, they're suffering. So there were points like that where I really was surprised that some of those old Reformation disagreements, no, they're still there. We just don't talk about them anymore. They're really still present. Then there was other stuff in talking with Catholics where I'm like, wow, if I hold one or two of your basic assumptions that I don't hold, I totally see how your whole system works and how that would be a 95% coherent read on the Bible. And I don't think anybody has more than a 95% coherent read. Every tradition has a fly in the ointment set of passages. They all know what they are. They're all sick of hearing those. They've all got their deflections, but ultimately every theological system has a handful of passages that cause them to be like, yeah, I know. And it's hard. And here's a convoluted, ridiculous explanation that I would never allow you to use for your difficult passages, but we got to use it for ours to piece our thing together. And so with the Catholic conversations and the assumptions about, okay, well, if there is some kind of visible window or canon string communication between us and dead Christians from before, because we are to understand Jesus' remarks in Jerusalem as being, God is the God of the living and not the dead. Therefore, interaction with the dead is possible. Well, okay, then I kind of understand how maybe they would think a little bit this way about purgatory. Maybe they would think this way about the imagery in church and the art, about saints. Big fight with the East about icons and whether this is an image of a saint or whether this is somehow an actual physical presence of a saint through art. The fights make more sense. The hang-ups make more sense. But I reject those foundational assumptions that Catholics have on a few points. And so like they hold up passages to me and say, look, obviously this, what else could it possibly mean? It clearly says in John chapter 6, this is my body, this is my blood. And I'm like, yeah, but then it says that I'm the door. And, is he literally a shepherd? I mean, I thought he was a carpenter. I mean, metaphor is a thing. But to them, with those assumptions, it's absolutely affirming and clarifying. And so I've been astonished by the passages that different traditions, I'm using Catholics as an example, will go to that to me, I would never think of supporting their thing or being this smoking gun. How can you miss it verse? But to them, given the handful of assumptions that they hold when they approach the Bible, that verse clearly means be Catholic or you're outside the salvation of God. He who does not have the church as his mother cannot have God as his father. And so what that did, all the way back to your question, is it brought me to a point of going, okay, well, what are my smoking gun verses for my tradition that I think makes a ton of sense, that to an outsider with a different set of starting assumptions, they'd be like, huh? And that's been, it has really sent me back to the text and has really kicked my butt to hang out with smart, competent people who I can't just write off as crazies or morally deficient or intellectually dishonest. I still disagree, but I've had to work much harder to disagree.
I like that phrase, disagree, but work harder to do so, right? Like that's an important thing. To dismiss is not the same as to disagree. When someone, when I'm having a conversation with someone and I say, listen, I know what you believe and I still disagree with you. Because some people, I think, genuinely think, and I think this is the height of pride among all of us, is we think, well, if a person just knew what I know, they would believe what I believe. And I've often said that's the height of pride. If I say to someone, if you just knew what I know, you'd believe what I believe. That's not true. I can know what you know and still disagree with you. I can know what you know and come to a different conclusion. That's hard.
And
for
I'm guessing you get this in the comments, that there's a dichotomy that people like you and I, who are arrogant enough or foolhardy enough to think we should record ourselves and put it on the internet and talk about God. I mean, it takes a certain kind of personality deficiency to even want to do that or think it's a good idea. And clearly you and I both have that deficiency. But one of the things we get in the comment section is the old dichotomy. And the dichotomy of the comment section is that if I don't think what the commenter thinks, I must be one of two things. And that is intellectually dishonest or ignorant and dumb. They can't imagine the third part. They can't imagine a trichotomy in which I might have put tremendous effort into listening and understanding exactly what you think, but I can't think something I don't think. No matter how much I'd like to not fight with you, I can't think a thing that I don't think. I think the opposite of you. And why is that such an alarming thing for everyone all of a sudden?
That's a wild thought. I mean, a great thought, but it brings me to something else. I often tell people the difference between like and love. I'm commanded to love. I'm never commanded to like, because I can't really choose what I like. I like what I like, right? I like vanilla, not chocolate. I like this. I like that. It's just what I like.
Sure.
God doesn't tell me to like my enemies. He tells me to love my enemies, because love is verbal and it's action. And I can do that even if I don't like a person, right? And the same thing you just said, I can't think something I don't think. That's brilliant. Like I can't think it because I don't think it. I can't make myself think it unless I'm convinced that I'm not going to think it. That's
yeah. And this is going to tiptoe me closer than I usually tiptoe to any of this sort of social commentary subject matter. But it's not just the church, dude. So you've got a Christian fundamentalism that we are emerging from that dominated the second half of the 20th century, maybe the whole 20th century. You and I are product of that era of youth group. There's ups and downs to that.
Sure.
Is what it is. So much of what's going on in culture right now is a dialogue with the youth group era of Protestant and evangelical Christianity. Okay, cool. That's one brand of fundamentalism where you don't talk to anyone else. You don't find out what anyone else thinks. You make something that works as long as we're in the bubble. MySpace burst the bubble in 2004 and put us in touch with everybody else all at once, unsupervised by our parents. And we discovered only a tiny percentage of people think the thing that I was told everybody ought to think. Uh-oh. And now you get the next 20 years of what the world has been. There's a shock reaction to some of the fundamentalist religious tendencies that we got away with within the church that were lazy in the era of youth group Christianity. Not to say that youth group is bad. I just haven't come up with a better name for that. Now, though, the reaction.
If I could just add a thought, I say a lot of churches today are the youth groups of the 90s. Those churches, those youth groups just became churches. And that's what we see in a lot of non-denominational churches is it's the same style of church, just grown up. It's just 40-year-olds who want church the way it was when they were 17, when they were 16.
Bedazzled jeans and all. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I'm not necessarily saying it's terrible or bad.
I'm saying bedazzled jeans are terrible. I am saying that.
Then don't watch my live stream. No, I'm just
I doubt that. So you got the cure to weird isolationist fundamentalism is not another version of fundamentalism as a reaction against it, but that's what's happened. So now we have a secular leftist fundamentalism as a way to say we reject our old religious, more right-leaning fundamentalism, and both are a disaster. Both are antisocial, both have sociopathic tendencies, both are no way to run a society, and both light the fuse on a long, old-timey, cartoony time bomb that is going to go off when that fuse burns down. The fuse burned down on our version of fundamentalism with the advent of social media in the early 2000s. We weren't built for it. We couldn't sustain it. It caused absolute chaos. Then, and we're at the same point right now, the fuse is just about burned down on the new secular leftist fundamentalist religion. The gig's up. Nobody's charmed anymore. It's not working. But one of the tenets of both of those fundamentalist expressions is you will think things you don't think. You will look at a thing and say that thing is a certain way in your brain, and then with your mouth, you will say the opposite of that in order to receive acceptance into this circle of people. You will think orthodox things for our recently created orthodoxy, or you will be punished socially in ways that you will find absolutely crippling. And it's exhausting. It's a terrible way to live. And the absolute gracelessness of the leftist fundamentalism that has dominated culture for the last 10 years is insufferable. And I'm sick of being told, hey, we thought of a thing last week that is now immutable and timeless and that everyone must now think and say and pledge allegiance to, or you're a monster, when I just don't think all of it. I think some of it, but I don't think all of it. And you're asking me to say and think things that I can't. I don't think it. If you demand people lie to themselves in order for acceptance to happen, you destroy the person. You destroy the honesty and sincerity of the process. You destroy the soft heart that is willing to learn and that has the capacity for actual charity and understanding with people they disagree with. And before leftist fundamentalism did it for the last 10 years, rightist Christian-ish fundamentalism did it in the late 20th century. And at its worst, both of those things demand the same of people. In order to receive acceptance, you must say you think things you don't yet think. There will be no process. There will be no time. You have been told what the thing is. Think it. Well, I don't understand it yet. It doesn't matter. Think it. To not think it is hurtful and a transgression. Do you want to transgress? Well, then think the right thing. And there's no respect in that system for people made in the image of God, people made with a conscience, people who God clearly understands go through processes, get led through deserts and journeys and have conversions. I mean, it takes a minute. Like, you got to be patient with people, and demanding swearing fealty to positions you don't think as a condition of acceptance or being able to even be friendly with someone else. It's cruel. It's antithetical to the gospel. And you'll get fake converts to your thing, whether it's secular fundamentalism or religious fundamentalism, but those converts will suck, and they will flame out, and they will fail, and they will not actually move your thing forward. They're no leaders. You've only picked off the weak who are afraid to be rejected. All the strong will just keep their mouths shut or go somewhere else. So one of the things that I've loved about our era of the internet, and that I've loved about the opportunity to go around and hang out with Christians who aren't like me, is I'm getting to meet a ton of people who are extending me mercy in that regard. I've met a lot of people who don't as well, but I've met tons of Catholics and Orthodox and people more committed to all of the tenets of Calvinism than I am, who can understand that where we disagree is not spiteful. I'm genuinely listening. I'm genuinely, like, I care. Oh, I'm thinking about it. I wouldn't want to be wrong, but I can't think what I don't think. So you got to give me a minute and trust that I'm not trying to put a thumb in anybody's eye. I'm listening, and I'm growing. I'm thinking about it. And when you run into a bunch of Christians who've been transformed by the gospel in such a way that they have that God-like comfortable in their own skin. I mean, God is the most not insecure being in the history of ever. To have the first two people he makes rebel against him immediately and not flip out with a bunch of banter and just clear the table with the back of his hand. How dare you? But instead to embark on a multi-millennium redemptive plan and to be mocked along the way, to be disregarded, to be rejected by your own people, to have people claim one thing and then deny you 3 times 2 minutes later, and to just persist. He's so secure in who he is. And the people who I've met who seem to be deeply touched by his character and who imitate his character have that same sense of security. They don't panic and freak out in the moment that there are people out there who are wrong. They don't panic and freak out that they're talking with someone who doesn't know all the things like they know yet. There's just this patience and this long view to it, this air of forgiveness and empathy to it that I think we see in the character of God as well. Now, ultimately, God is judge. His judgments are right. It's given to Christ to judge the nations, and he will, and he'll be absolutely correct in every single judgment. But what an unbelievable amount of forbearance he has demonstrated and continues to demonstrate. And through the process of going around all these churches, I've met a whole bunch of people who I think are theologically wrong about some things, and yet that very unique characteristic, that trait that is a mark of the character of God that you do not get in society. I only see it coming from God. I see it all over them, and it's challenging to me and makes me want to imitate that in them as they imitate God. So the truth is, the biggest change for me in all of this has not been, now I like this point of Catholic theology more, or I think the Orthodox have a point here, maybe I'll be Orthodox. No, the biggest change for me is I am seeing God deeply at work in the lives of people who don't believe what I believe, but other historical, creedal, Orthodox Christians. And I want to imitate the stuff I see God doing in their lives, and I want it to reflect on my character. And I think God is using them to make me suck a little bit less, and I'm grateful.
I love that phrase. No, I mean, it's very deep. That's very, very heartfelt. And I appreciate a lot of what you were saying, just how it changes us as we, as we are having to be confronted by things that many of our more recent ancestors weren't confronted with, because they weren't open up to a world that was larger than their community, or maybe their, their denomination, or something like that. Like I said, I grew up in a town where, there was First Baptist Church, and then there was the Pentecostal church, and there was a Catholic church, but that's where the non-Christians went. I'm not just being funny, but this is the way it was expressed, right? But there is so much there is so much value in what you're saying, and I hope people are listening. And yet at the same time, not saying that there aren't lines that have to be drawn. Obviously Christ is a line, obviously faith in him, and those things, there are standards. And I wouldn't ever want anyone to think I wasn't saying that. And I certainly don't want anybody to think I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth. But one of the tagline of the show is seeking superior theology and denominational unity, one joke at a time. Like that's and all
Great
three
tagline.
of those lines,
Love it.
But all three of those lines sort of don't go together. If you're seeking superior theology, then you're probably not seeking unity, because you think you're better. But at the same time, it's meant to point out, no, we should all be seeking the right thinking, right? Superior theology is not anything, but this is what's right. We want to seek what's right, God's theology, we think his thoughts after him, kind of thing.
Yes.
And yet at the same time, we want to do it by learning as much as we can, and not automatically dismissing those who disagree with us, because we could be wrong about some things.
We could be wrong about some things. Yeah. And you and I are gunning for the same thing. The term that I use to express that is convictional unity. In the 20th century, ecumenicism, the strategy there was diminish how hard we believe things in order to get along better. The problem is that attracts people who don't have much in the way of convictions, and would rather get along than try to use the Lutheran phrase, confess back to God what God has confessed to us, to use the Calvinist phrase, to achieve final ascendancy and superior theology. The ecumenical thing was attractive to people who were ill-equipped and unwilling to fight, but not fight in the mean way, like to argue, but not argue in the argumentative way, like argue with thought, work an idea out, put the tennis ball in play and hit it back and forth 40 times if you have to really grind through an idea. I think that 20th century ecumenical movement was largely just liberalism, and liberalism not in the slur kind of sense, but in the nothing can really be known. There is no truth. This fighting is silly and people don't like it. It's bad for marketing and PR. We shouldn't argue about things or hold these kind of convictions. The convictions and the pursuit of convictions, that's the problem. Unity should be the central pursuit, and convictions are the hurdle we have to overcome. There's no future in that. That isn't going to work in the age of the internet either, because you can't help but think what you think. And so convictional unity means, look, I don't think there's a purgatory. And I don't think that if there were a purgatory, that me making donations to a certain organization would do anything to reduce the amount of time people would spend there. I just don't see it. Why don't I see it? Well, part of the reason I don't see it is because I don't think Peter dying in Rome gives Rome some unique authority. I don't think it. It doesn't make me mad at Catholics that they do think it. I just don't think it. I've tried to think it. I don't. I think what I think. Here I stand. I can't stand anywhere else. Maybe someday I'll be able to. So the result is I have convictions. I can't not have them. I can't pretend I think something different than what I think. But neither can all my Catholic friends. They think what they think for a reason. And maybe it just got imprinted on us when we were kids, and in that age where the ducklings look at whatever duck-shaped thing walks by them and they're like, that is my mom and I am following that. Look, yep, it's possible that that's what happened to me. I'd like to think it's not, and that it's a more thoughtful process, but maybe I just saw the duck of evangelicalism when I was at the impressionable age, and that's always what is imprinted on me and made sense. Well, why couldn't that be ordained by God? Why would God not use such an impressionable age and a moment of impression to make me a convictional Christian for the rest of my life? Maybe my Catholic friends had the exact same thing happen. Why would we cheapen that? Okay, well, if that's what God ordained in people's lives and that's what he used, then all right, I can respect the convictions that we have, even if the convictions aren't 100% rational and we couldn't tell you every single thing why. And even if people I disagree with might happen to have a few good points, okay, well, these are still my convictions and I'm listening and I'm being honest about it. If we accept that about each other, okay, now how do we have unity? Does that mean we just can't now? We just can't have nice things because I think things and I can't not think them, and you think things and you can't not think them? I mean, we're naming the exact same deity with these creeds. We're reading the text. We're looking at the same passages here. We are trying to honor the same God, 3 in 1. We're trying to model our lives after Christ. We're pursuing his kingdom. I mean, we're doing so much of the same stuff. Most of the people I disagree with put a little bit more emphasis on the authority of an institution than I do, or a little more emphasis on the authority of personal revelation and opinions than I do. I tend to be of the 3 threads of historical authority. I tend to be part of the Bible thread. I think God ordained it, not the church. I think it's reliable and accurate. It's all the things that it says it is. And I think the character of God is revealed not exclusively through it, but authoritatively through it. So those are my convictions, and that's where I'm going to lean. My Catholic friends think the Bible's really important, and they think the magisterium and the authority of the church also carries an authority that is on par with that. We're going to come to some different conclusions. This isn't ecumenicism that you're proposing. This isn't ecumenicism that I'm proposing. It is convictional unity. When I understand and I can articulate your position in a way that is flattering and that is fair and that is how you would articulate it, and still reject portions of it, and you can do the same for me, now we have real unity. Now we're actually standing back to back. Now we can actually move the gospel forward together. Now we are in communion, even if we don't go to the same institution or sign the exact same paperwork. And that's what I'm gunning for with the videos I do and the internet stuff that I make. I want to celebrate each other's baptisms, even if we don't totally agree on what they do. I want to take the table together, which is just absolutely odious to my Eucharistic friends, but I still think we can. I can't believe that that transformation happened, but I can believe that this is pointing to the exact same thing and take it as seriously as you're taking it. Why can't I stand next to you in some sort of setting, and why can't just even once we take this together, convictionally believing it does different things? Why can't we find a way to do that? We should be able to. Why can't we open the scriptures together? We should be able to do these things. Why can't I root for the success of gospel-oriented, creedal, historical, biblical churches, even if I wouldn't do it that way? That's not ecumenicism. Those objectives that I have and those goals, that's convictional unity. And it's always nice to meet people who, even if they might not say it the exact same way, are pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, I actually have something that I say that surprises people sometimes, and I'd really like your thought on this. I know we're getting to the hour mark, and I don't want to keep you from your family too much longer, but I do want to ask you this question. Because I'm honest when I say this to people. I say I actually think denominations are a good thing, and this is what I mean by that. Okay, so you agree, and so people who don't agree don't automatically dismiss what I'm saying. What I mean by that is when we say denominations, we're saying other Christians who see things differently than we do versus cults, which have denied foundational Christian doctrine. And we would say there are groups that fall into those categories, which we cannot lock arms with, right? And then, of course, and this is not where we're going to come to any conclusions today, but there is a big question about Roman Catholicism in the gospel. There's a big question about Eastern Orthodoxy in the gospel regarding specifically issues of the Reformation. Has the gospel been obscured and things like that? And so there are questions in people's minds, but the whole idea of denominationalism is there can be people who disagree with me, and yet at the same time, I can still call them brother in Christ. And that's where the heart of it is. And I think that's good because it allows for what you said, convictional unity. I can be a convictional Calvinist and still have unity with someone who is a convictional Arminian, so long as we are, as neither one of us are denying the gospel and and not just our understanding, but what the gospel is in its simplicity, that we are to turn from our sin, to trust Christ, to turn from unbelief and put our faith in him, and that his sacrifice is in fact sufficient to cover our sin, and that we can stand before God having been declared righteous because of what he did. Those things I think are so foundational and must be affirmed. And then after that, we can, like you said, I interviewed a group of Lutherans. I do a show called Bow Tie Dialogues where I wear a bow tie and I interview people, and I like to interview other pastors, and they did tell me that if I came to their church, I wouldn't be welcome to be at their table. And I said, okay. I said, I appreciate the honesty. Yeah. I wasn't angry. I wasn't, well, I can't believe you'd say that. No. Okay. That's kind of what I expected. And one of the guys said, well, you're not buying what we're selling. That was the phrase he used, because he says, we believe something different. You're not buying what we're selling. And I was like, okay, I get it. But at the same time, the reverse is not true. If they came to our church, they would be welcome at our table, because we say, if you believe in Christ, if you are a baptized, we do say, if you're a baptized believer, you're welcome at our table. And so, as long as you're not under discipline at your own church, that's one caveat. We say, if you're coming from another church and you're under the discipline of the church, then we would honor that and say, please don't partake, because, before reconciling with the previous church.
Good. So, wow. Yeah. Most people are so eager to grow at any cost. They don't say that, but you should, and you're right. That's good.
So you think denominationalism, me saying that it's good, is actually
sorry, I got distracted by you including church discipline at another church is something that you communicate with communion, which I think is excellent. Denominations are they're great. They make you efficient and effective. The body has many parts. It's okay. This isn't. People act like denominations are some kind of invention that happened after the Bible, that are a result of Christian failure. They're not. The gospel was always meant to be infinitely translatable. From the time that the first elements of the gospel were revealed early on in the book of Genesis to Abram. Look, I'm picking you out of the clear blue sky, dude from whatever modern day Kuwait, and I'm going to be your God. You have to do nothing. I'm going to do all of the following things, which is going to include making you a great nation, and you're going to be blessed, and also all the nations are going to be blessed through you. That is in the founding covenant of the whole redemptive plan. Everybody's going to be blessed. Isaiah and Zechariah paint this beautiful picture of the flawed people of Israel taking the rest of the nations and the kings by the hand and taking them up to the throne of God to show them this thing. And eventually all the knees bow and the tongues confess. This was always meant for everyone. It isn't a New Testament invention or innovation. It was always meant for everybody. And the church gets going, and we don't even get out of generation one, and we realize, hey, we're better if on this next trip, Mark goes with you, and I go over here, and you go over there. Hey, we don't even get to Acts out of Acts 15, barely the halfway mark of the book of Acts, and we got to form some denominations. We're going to have an Antiochian denomination. We're going to have a Jerusalemite delegation here, denomination, and we're going to have a version of Christianity, an expression of the church born out of the synagogue of the freedmen that needs to exist as well, because the gospel has no trouble working with any of these cultural sensibilities. None. It's just fine. It's secure in its own skin. But to accommodate the weakness of humanity, the gospel is perfectly designed like a receptor site in a protein to fit with anything, everything. It's why it's gone global in ways that nothing else ever has or ever will. We should celebrate the heck out of this, my friend. This is a complete win. Why would it make sense for me to absolutely kneecap my effectiveness by going to a church that stylistically, culturally, is totally antithetical to who I am and what I do? And we waste all of our time internally bickering about how to do this thing or that. Why would I not go align with people where we acknowledge everybody else is slaying it? We're rooting for all of you. Tell us how we can support. But when we partner up with this shared set of convictions, we kick butt and we're very effective, and we don't have to waste time redoing all the church councils every year before we can pick what color carpet we put in, or before we can go do some simple outreach event. We have unity. It's ideological, theological unity. It's stylistic unity. Okay, good. That's good to go. Now let's go take ground and do kingdom stuff. Denominations done right are biblical, and they free you up to partner with the right people to maximize your effectiveness with this very limited window of time you have in this world to be an ambassador of the kingdom. I don't like this anti-denomination talk. I think it's important, it's good, it's ordained, and it's something we should lean into and enjoy and appreciate about each other more.
Awesome. That was great. Brother, I'm going to do something with you real quick here as we begin to draw to a close, because again, we're over the hour mark, and I could talk to you all day. I've really enjoyed getting to know you. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation.
Likewise.
I want to. I have this little thing I want to do. It's just 5 quick questions, and there really are just quick answer questions.
I'll play ball.
Some of it's pop culture, some of it's a little different, but I know I think you're kind of a pop culture guy, kind of a, I've seen your Star Wars list and things like that. And somebody did ask why Solo was so low on your Star Wars
because of how
list.
not good it is.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Well, what was on? I didn't see the list. I only saw the question. What was your what's your first? Because I'll tell you my number one if you tell me your number one. Okay,
yeah, I can do that.
Star Wars.
I mean, it's bounced around a little bit, but here, I'm pulling it up so that I don't make any mistakes and be inconsistent in my answers and embarrass myself further than usual. Number one is easy, though. It's Empire, and I think most people agree.
Okay. I was going to say, okay, I agree. That I just want to make sure you weren't a heretic, because, everything else.
No, give me your number two, though. This is where it starts to get interesting.
Spaceballs.
All right. You win.
Sorry. Okay, now give me your list real quick so everybody can hear it. We're just run through your list real quick.
Seriously?
I don't have one in front of me.
Here we go.
Yeah.
This is movies and TV shows, all Star Wars franchises except the stupid ones that don't even rise to the level of cultural awareness. Number 1, Empire, Andor, Bad Batch, Rogue One, Clone Wars, New Hope, Return of the Jedi, Mandalorian, but season 3 almost deserves to be somewhere else on the list because it dragged the whole thing down so far. Revenge of the Sith, Rebels, Force Awakens, Phantom Menace, Ahsoka, Attack of the Clones, large gap, Kenobi, Solo, Boba Fett, giant chasm, Rise of Skywalker, Last Jedi. That's my list.
I did see your list because I remember the giant chasm, and I agree 100%. I saw those in the theater and wanted to leave. So yeah, no, I'm good. Good. I would agree with most of that. Some of that, I'm not so much a Star Wars nerd. I'm more of a superhero nerd. If you can see behind me, I got Batman. I've got a 3-foot tall Superman statue over there. So I'm kind of a
very Seinfeld of you.
Yeah. So yeah. Oh man, very much. And I have a Seinfeld picture right there. So
okay.
So
it's all a little bit bokeh out, but I can see it now. So what's the most grievous error on my list? Let's try out conviction here.
I honestly, I enjoyed Phantom Menace probably more than you did. So I would put it a little higher, not necessarily up at the top, but your Phantom Menace was pretty low. I like the character of Darth Maul. I don't think he got enough screen time. I don't think he got enough character development, but I think he was a cool fighter. And as a martial arts guy, I've been in karate for 30 years. So watching him do karate was like real legit stuff was pretty fun. Ray Park is his name.
Darth Maul split too soon, but you get more of him in the Clone Wars, which is nice as well. I was really heavily influenced by the thinking of Red Letter Media and their Mr. Plinkett Star Wars reviews on YouTube, which I don't recommend to anyone. You'll learn new swears. They're quite potent. But man, the takedown they did on the prequel trilogy 10 or 12 years ago, I found those to be pretty compelling, and it probably has an outsized effect on my opinions that I should reevaluate at some point more fairly.
Gotcha. Real quick, 5 questions. What story from the Bible would you make into a movie that hasn't been made yet? I guess this isn't too fast.
That hasn't been made
That's not a
yet.
fast
See,
question.
that
Yeah.
that adds to the toughness. Okay, I'm going to stall by saying the one from church history that I would want to do, and that is, I mean, there's this legend about the Venetians putting together a squad of ninja monks to go and steal the body of Mark from Alexandria. I want that movie, like a heist movie in the Middle Ages with Venetian ninja monks stealing a corpse from the Bible. Man, I'd want the juicy stuff. I mean, okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to break the rules. I'm going to answer the way I want to answer. I would like an honest telling of Esther. Esther is a gritty story, and the wiles and the attributes she uses to ascend to a position of power, and her initial refusal to help before receiving a death threat from Mordecai, a veiled threat, but it's there. That makes the story so much better, that she's not a Mary Sue. She's not perfect. She did not get there by reading Jewish poetry to King Xerxes all night. I mean, it's a little bit salacious on the front end, and she matures as a character, she matures into the role of queen and deliverer of her people. It's so much better than these stupid family-friendly sanitized versions. I want the real Esther story with grit. I think it'd be great.
That's so funny, because one of my elders recently said something very similar in Sunday school. He was just saying, Esther's not what you think. And he sort of said a few of the things that you just said, and a few people got a little uncomfortable. It's like, yeah, it is uncomfortable.
Yep.
On that, if I don't want to answer every question, because I want to hear yours, but just so you
wait. No, I'm doing it wrong. I'm doing it wrong. Give me time out. Those would be my answers, Mr. Keith. What would be your answer to those questions?
I want a John Wick style version of the Levi and Simeon revenging the rape of Dinah. Yeah. I want a John Wick style version of that story, where it's just 2 guys avenging their sister's rape, and tricking them into the circumcision, and then going in and just slaughtering everybody. I think that would be a great movie.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I want to see that. Your answer was better than mine. And I would like to add to that I would like, do you remember, what was that YouTube short film that came out like 10 years ago? It's like a Cobra Lightning warrior. He rides a T-Rex, and they have Uzis. Oh my goodness, it was funny. It was delightful. It was just all the ridiculous 80s tropes. And there's a side scroller video game sequence where he starts ripping the limbs off of Nazis and doing splits and spinning around. I want that, but with Samson and a donkey jawbone. The side-scroller 2D video game with, 12 out of 10 level video game gore and violence, maybe even in a 16-bit style. That's what I want.
All right. These next few aren't as fun, but they're still good. What's your favorite podcast? What I know you're a creator, but do you listen to anything? What's your favorite?
I listen to
my show. I know I'm your...
That's the right answer. I listen to, this is embarrassing. I listen to a lot of sports talk radio. I like the narrative. And so there are a handful of shows that I enjoy that way. I really like audiobooks. Audiobooks are my podcast. I always have a book queued up. I'm always working on one right now. Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. Before that, Joseph Heller's Catch-22. Never read that before. And that is an absolute revelation. That's as good a book as I've ever read, ever. And I still don't know what to do with it. It's very rare that I laugh at a novel, but that book absolutely killed me throughout, just with the style and the pace. So yeah, I tend that way, which is dumb because I'm a podcast host. So I should probably listen to more podcasts.
I'm an audiobook guy too, though. I just purchased a program called Speechify, which is an AI reading program, which will read things that aren't in audiobook. So like if sometimes people will send me books that aren't published yet because they want me to read them and endorse them and things like that. And you can put it in, it will read it to you in a natural voice, not some, robot voice. But
You
again,
friggin'
not a
genius.
sponsor.
What is it
Yeah,
called?
Speechify is the name of the program.
That application right there that you just said you use it for, that is such a better answer than the one I have for that particular request. Because I just, when am I going to get to it? And so I say yes, and then I let people down. This way I could let people down less. That's great. Okay.
And it's a little bit, there's a cost to it. There's $140 for the year, but for me, it was worth it. $140, for the whole year. That to me was worth the cost. So.
Does it sound good? How's the delivery?
I tell you what, man, it's great. And I listen to audiobooks all the time. You're never going to have the exact, perfect of a person, but it's as close as you're going to get. And you can have it cut out. Like, I don't know if you've ever listened to something that like it tried to read a URL or something that's in the book or a footnote.
Yeah.
You can have it to where it automatically skips those. And that's what's great.
Huh.
It skips past that and it just gives you the content, and it's great. I'm listening to one right now. A brother wrote a book on anxiety, and it's such a great book. And I'm 2 hours into a 4-hour read, and I've done it all in one day. I did it 2 hours yesterday while I was driving back and forth to the church. So it's great.
You clever man. Yeah, you've made my life better. Thank you. That's an excellent suggestion.
Awesome. Best sermon you've ever heard? That one might be tough.
That is tough. Okay, I'll tell you one. I don't even remember everything about it. What I remember is this. I was coming off of 20 plus years of pastoring churches. It was a good experience, but it was hard. I don't think people totally understand how much that can twist up a guy. It's an odd role. I don't mean twist him up and make him evil. I mean, you're being a human with people, and also that gets evaluated at the end of every year by your elders to determine if you should be retained. It's just an odd place to live socially, and it can make guys weird after a while, and it makes it very hard to go to church. You don't go to church like normal people go to church, so you sort of are deprived of that very life-giving thing for your whole career unless you're very creative with your congregation. And yes, this is me telling people on elder boards to be far more thoughtful about this and figure out how to make it so that your pastor can go to church. Because for the same reason that you elders need to go to church to be nourished by the word, your pastor needs to go to church. But most pastors go their whole lives and they don't go to church. That was eating at me when I was done. And I got done. I dropped into some churches. I do the thing on the internet, so that made it weird. I didn't realize that doing this would screw up my ability to just go to a church. But now it's weird. Now we got to have interactions about things people liked or didn't like that I said. And that's weird. I didn't realize I'd be hurting myself in that way by choosing to do what I do here. So I was having a really tough time. And I went to this free Lutheran church, got to know the guy who pastors the church, just really impressed with who he is, his demeanor. And one of the sermons early on that I heard from him, he was making the point that the way God has ordained things, one of the chief ways that the God of the universe wants to serve people like me, serve me, is through the church. God ministers to people. God serves. It's a dangerous word, but if you really think about it, I think he's right to say it. God serves lowly people through his church. And I got all I had an intellectual and an emotional response to that. And it just occurred to me that I had served the church a lot and viewed myself as the one who is serving people, but really as an intermediary. When I was getting anything right at all, that was God serving people and me playing a little role through it. And now it's time for me to shut my stupid mouth and not lead anything and be served by the God of the universe, even though it makes me uncomfortable, like it made Peter uncomfortable getting his feet washed. Be served by the God of the universe through taking the table and celebrating baptism and being nourished by the word and being in fellowship with other believers, even when it's not easier. I don't know why we're doing it. And maybe of all the sermons I've ever heard, that's the one that I can recall that has been most needed and most affected me. And that's just here in the last few years. Really important for me. What about you?
You know what's funny is that's such a great answer. And my typical answer that I say is the one that early on really helped me the most was R.C. Sproul's On the Holiness of God. That just was always one that sort of helped me to understand who I'm working for, if you will. I'm working for the holy God of the universe, who's created all things by the word of his power. It's just such a masterful sermon. And looking through Isaiah 6, that was always like, this is who God is. And it was helpful. But more recently, and this has been within the last few months, I was at a conference and one of the brothers there, Michael Schultz, preached a sermon on the how Jesus casting out the demon, and he says, some demons go away and then they come back and the house is swept and the things are in order, but it's empty, and so they come back and they return. And he talked about how so often we renew everything on the outside. And he was really kind of bringing to bear the issue of the modern, like this whole reform movement and this whole, new fundamentalism that's out there, and how we're cleaning the house up and we're doing everything. But much of it is not being filled with the Spirit. It's just adorning the outside with catechisms and all these other things, but we're not really changing the inside. And therefore we're opening ourselves up to be the next layer of bad fundamentalism. And man, that was powerful. That whole, I said to him, that's the best sermon I've heard in a long time. Just how dangerous it can be to clean the outside of the cup, but the inside of the cup not be clean. And man, that was powerful. And he's a good friend. I've had him on the show a couple of times, Pastor Michael Schultz. So yeah.
Cool.
So, two quick things. Who's the best 80s show co-starring a vehicle? Best 80s TV show co-starring a car?
Yeah. Airwolf. A car. Wait, you're changing it to car? You said vehicle.
I said vehicle. No, I said vehicle. I said, yeah, you're right. I said car the second time because I'm thinking of Knight Rider, of course. But you said
they put Jan Michael Vincent and Ernest Borgnine in a fake helicopter and then just had them fly through the same canyon for 3 seasons and have the same dog. Somehow they get into a dogfight once a week, 40 times a year in the same canyon in Southern California. And this doesn't raise any red flags for anyone. They just keep doing it. Why are there Russian MiGs in 1984 in a canyon in Southern California on 12 consecutive weeks that somehow can be tracked down by a helicopter and blown up? This didn't even make the news. And it's Jan Michael Vincent, who's a looker, and Ernest Borgnine, who's charming, and I think even had a role as Cup in Transformers the movie. These are legendary actors. And we're supposed to pretend like this show just didn't exist, plus a banging theme. I'm sorry. I know your question was meant to point me toward vehicles that roll on the ground, but I got to go Airwolf.
That is so great because normal acceptable answers are, Knight Rider, Dukes of Hazzard, A-Team, even Ghostbusters, the real Ghostbusters
Mask.
TV show with Ecto-1. Mask. Oh man, Mask was great. But man, Airwolf is awesome. I got to give you props for pulling that one out because I said cars. I didn't even think. You're right. That is excellent. All right, last one.
But for you, what is the correct answer?
Oh, for me, I'm sorry. I was a diehard Knight Rider fan, and if to this day, if I found a 1985 Trans Am T-Tops that was black and it was for sale, I would buy it today. I would beg my wife to go into my retirement fund, and I would ask her for the however much money it was. If it wasn't, stupid expensive, I would drive it today. And so I have never seen, I've actually went on like the marketplace, like Facebook Marketplace. Is anybody selling an 85 to 87 Trans Am, and outside of that, it would have been Smokey and the Bandits Trans Am, which is 10 years before the 75 Trans Am. So either one, I'm a Trans Am fan. And so
I cried when I was a kid and Kit got put in that acid.
Oh man.
And his voice faded out, went away.
There's so many great scenes in that show. So many times Kit died and came back. It was like,
yeah, well, he's a robot. He'll be fine. But okay, the voice of Kit though, that's Mr. Feeney from Boy Meets World, right? It's the same dude.
And I was so happy when I found out that Lutheran Satire, that is actually how he says his last name. His name's Hans Feeney. So
Okay.
when I had him on my show, I did the Feeney call, Feeney. That was great.
Well done. Very well done.
Last thing, if you had to eat a chicken sandwich today, would you go to Popeyes or Chick-fil-A?
Y'all have a saying in the
this
South.
will get you in trouble. Yeah.
We don't have a Chick-fil-A here. There's been a rumor of its arrival for a decade. It's been vastly overstated. We do have a Popeyes. And what I would say about the Popeyes here in Rapid City, South Dakota, and the folks who run it is bless their hearts.
It's good stuff.
They are doing their darndest.
They're trying. They're
to run a Popeyes. It just, man, I keep supporting them, but if I could go to a Popeyes that is firing on all cylinders, I'm going to take the Popeyes sandwich.
Gotcha.
If I have to go to the Popeyes here in town, well, I believe better days are ahead, and I believe in the folks over there, and that someday things are gonna get right.
Good deal.
2.5 stars. Would lightly recommend.
Awesome. Well, brother, I want to thank you so much. I've had so great a conversation with you. It's been so much fun. I hope people really get a lot out of this. And the meteor stuff that we talked about today, I think was really of value. So thank you for bringing value to the show. Thank you for what you do on YouTube. I think it is great for people to see and learn, and you're doing a good thing, brother. So thank you so much for coming on.
This was a lot of fun. I would love to do this again sometime. I really, really enjoyed the conversation, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. Praise the Lord. All right, guys. Well, I want to tell you all again how much I appreciate you as an audience. And thank you again for hanging with us for the last hour and a half. And if you're watching this on YouTube and you say, hey, man, I can't watch YouTube for an hour and a half, but I can listen to it. Remember, you can always jump over to our audio podcast. It's on Apple, Spotify, and all the other podcast places. Just look up Your Calvinist with Keith Foskey, and you can find us there. Thank you again for listening to Your Calvinist podcast. My name is Keith Foskey, and I've been Your Calvinist. May God bless you.